Good morning. We are going to start a new journey on our thoughts for the day, and we're going to spend our time in the book of 1 Peter. In our discipleship program at Lifeline, we're focusing a bit on 1 Peter this year, and I thought it would be good for us to do this in our thoughts for the day. So we're going to move pretty slowly through 1 Peter. And in general, the context of 1 Peter by way of introduction has to do with writing to people who are dispersed, particularly Jews who are dispersed that are believers. And by dispersed, I mean they're out in different areas throughout the Mediterranean world, particularly in Asia Minor, or modern-day Turkey. Peter writes, Peter, an apostle, this is chapter 1, verse 1, Peter, an apostle of Jesus Christ, to those who are elect exiles of the dispersion in Pontus, Galatia, Cappadocia, Asia, and Bithynia. So this is his audience. What can we have or glean from this today? Well, that phrase, elect exiles, is important. Peter will use the word exile, and you'll see it show up in chapter 1, verse 17. It'll show up in chapter 2, verses 11, and in context, verses 11 and 12. And it's a theme. He's writing to people who are both physically in exile and who are in exile in terms of cultural context. They're out living among people where they don't fit. This is the nature of our life. We live in a culture where we don't fit. Now, that's true if you're watching this, you live in Utah, you know that's sort of uniquely true for you as a Christian. But it's true way beyond that. We live now in what scholars would call a post-Christian society. If you look over at Western Europe, you can see that it's been that way for the last few decades. We tend to be 20, 25 years behind the thought patterns and cultural zeitgeist of Western Europe, and that's where we are today. And by post-Christian, I mean that the moral norms and mores that once were agreed upon and the worldview that once formed the subtext that people may reject but formed a kind of basic way of approaching life no longer forms those basic tenets, no longer forms those basic principles. So as a result, we necessarily are exiles. So as we go through 1 Peter together, we're going to think about what it means to be an exile. So as we begin, I just want you to think about the phrase elect exiles, and I'll leave you with this. You're an exile, but you're an exile who's been chosen by God. You're an exile, not just out there somewhere. You're an exile who has been chosen and loved by God, an elect exile. And so the first place of your comfort is in your identity with God, even if others around you reject you. More to come in 1 Peter, but may the Lord bless you today.